we can kind of jump into the Q&A fireside chat. So to kind of give you some context about why we're doing this topic and why it's important. So to give you some stats at the moment, using US as a benchmark right now, unemployment rate is 13% in the US, and in Singapore, the unemployment rate has been the highest it's ever been in a decade. So, this gets us thinking, like, this is really a great time for us to all upskill, to really think about our career and our future looking plans, and think about how it is and how we should be building a strong network of community that will, whether it's professional or in our careers. So Helen, I guess the first question is, what does it mean to you to future-proof your career? And in that same vein, what have you done to future-proof your own career?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily. I think this is a great question and obviously very central to our theme this evening as we sit here in Singapore. So for me, future-proofing a career is really about thinking about obviously what you want or might want in the future, and essentially asking the right questions. So, to give you an example, when you start your career as a grad coming out of university, you're not necessarily thinking about 10 or 15 years down the line and whether that kind of career or even the company that you're working for, the industry that you're working in, is going to be the right industry for you in the future. So the types of things that you need to keep in mind when you're looking at future-proofing your career are flexibility, certainly. So, if you're planning to be, let's say, working in the airline industry, so you're planning to be a pilot, you're planning to be staff in some way in that particular industry, that's a very difficult thing to change. You can't do that job from home. You have to be kind of on that aeroplane or on ground or whatever it is. And I think, that's quite an extreme example, but to bring it down a couple of levels, it also depends on, are you working in an industry where you see women at the top of their game? Are you working for a company that supports female leadership, that supports mentorship, that supports women's careers, and you can kind of physically see that happening in that organization? And if you're not, is there a way to change that? Is there a way to have that conversation or set up committees or organizations within that business to move that forward? I think it's understanding where you want to progress to and how progressive the choices that you're making are. Now, obviously, when you're kind of 21 or 22, it's very difficult to future cast 15 years into the future all the time. But I think as you start to get a little bit older and perhaps you see your options narrowing down, those are the types of things you need to start considering when you're making your next move. You can't change history, but you can change what you're doing now that will directly impact your future career.
Yeah, definitely. I think it really translates to all parts of your life too. Like where will you be in a year or 3 years from now or 5 years from now, whether it's like personal or career. I think it's very important to have, framework to think more forward looking. So is there a framework that you would suggest on, using for future proofing your career? And how would you, I guess, break it down, right? Like, would it be like 1 year from now or like 3 years from now, 10 years from now? Yeah. What framework would you use?
Yeah, I think, I imagine that many of the women who are on this call are perhaps, around my age, maybe not your age, Emily, you're definitely a bit younger than me, but around kind of my age, or, progressing into your career. So perhaps you've got kind of between, 8 and 10 years experience, or even kind of 5 years experience. So it's really about mapping out where you want to go. Are you happy where you are now? If not, why not? It's understanding that initial why piece. What is it that isn't working for you in your current career or your current industry? And how could you change that? Are there new skills that you might need to learn? Are there transferable skills that you have that you could transfer into a different industry? I mean, to give you an example of my career path, so I actually started out in the broadcast industry back in London, which was a very, very difficult industry to break into. It took me kind of 4 years or so of working for free, essentially, you know, doing another job, which was a great job, but just not the job that I was passionate about at the time. And, you know, I realized kind of 5 years into that, I was a radio producer for the BBC. So I was traveling all over the world. I was, you know, reporting and broadcasting from festival, you know, it was a music role. So broadcasting from festivals, from dark, dingy studios at 2 a.m. in the morning. And I think I loved it at that point. It was perfect for me. But when I got to around 30, it was kind of like, hang on a minute, this is not going to work for me as a 40-year-old or as a 50-year-old necessarily. I'm not going to be able to sustain this lifestyle and this passion with a family or anything else that might happen in the future. So the way that I really looked at it was, you know, what are the skills that I've got that I could transfer into another industry, into another line of work? So in terms of a year plan, I would say that would be your first port of call. Are you happy where you are? If you're not, what do you have that you can kind of transmute into a different field? In terms of any further along than that, you know, it's very difficult to plan if you haven't made that first step. I would say it's going to take you at least a year to get that move happening, unless you're very lucky and it's something related and you know somebody working in that industry already. So I would say just taking that first initial step, sitting down, looking at your CV, looking at those skill sets and how to position them to a different employment framework. That's how I did it. And, you know, that worked pretty successfully for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm curious to actually kind of dig more into, you know, that pivotal moment when you were working in the music, you know, the music industry, and you were like, okay, this isn't sustainable for, you know, further down my career. So how did you, you know, how did you plan for that, right? And how did you start venturing into different industries and look for, you know, things that you could translate your skills to? Like, what was that? Because it's such a mind shift, and it's also like a physical shift too. Yeah,
it was a huge mind shift. And, you know, bearing in mind that it took me sort of 3 or 4 years to get into paid work in that industry, I think people thought I was a bit crazy to be leaving it. It is a very kind of selective industry in the sense that there just aren't many jobs. So if you get a, you know, lifetime contract in that world, most people do not make the decision to leave, particularly if you're within the BBC or some other huge organization like that. I think for me, it really did come down to lifestyle. It started to impact my daily life and how happy I was. It started to impact relationships. You know, to give you an example, I was working night times and I was inevitably working most weekends. You know, that whether you're in a relationship or whether you're single at that point in your life is not really ideal. It's, you know, you sort of feel like you've done the hard yards and you should progress from there in some way and be doing something that's a little bit more amenable to using your free time for fun. And it's also all encompassing, you know, that kind of industry is very sort of passion driven. It requires you to keep that passion going. You know, it's not just a job, it really is a lifestyle. And I think I also wanted something that had the potential to earn me some more money, where there was a genuine career path kind of moving upward. I didn't really see that. And, you know, to gain a bit more commercial exposure, to understand more how the commercial world worked, which you don't when you're in that industry. It's not about money, it's about audience figures, and it's about, you know, how many people you reach. So those were the types of things that were going on in my head at the time. And, you know, being in London in the media world, I knew lots of other friends and associates who were working in related industries, let's say, so marketing, communications, PR, you know, all of those, social media, all of those types of things that revolve around what I was doing, and definitely were more commercially savvy, definitely had a better work-life balance in many ways, and definitely was something that made sense to me from a pay perspective and a commercial and financial perspective as well. And I was just pretty determined to get into that. And I really felt that if I didn't get out of this trap, that I would become more and more unhappy. And that's really what drove it. And I figured that, this could still be my hobby. It's not like I was leaving it behind. I could still DJ, I could still still had all the same friends. That wasn't an issue. So for me, it was, I remember very, very vividly one Monday afternoon, because I had Mondays off because I worked all weekend, sitting kind of in my flat in London, and literally just getting my CV out and going, okay, what skills do I have here that would work for me in a more commercial environment? And what could that commercial environment look like, number one? Number two, who do I know in that environment who can help open some doors for me? And so I kind of rejigged my CV a bit. I sent it out to a bunch of people who worked in PR and branding and digital and all that kind of stuff, and said, look, here's my skills. What do you think? Who could I approach? Do you have anything going on in your organization? And, I was very lucky that doors started to open from that point. And I realized that actually my skill set was very valuable in a different industry. And, I went for interviews and I got a job pretty quickly, and there you go. And it was a huge learning curve. It was a huge learning curve. It was, as you say, it was a huge mindset shift, a massive cultural shift for me, in terms of going from that industry into PR and marketing. But I knew it was the right thing to do, and it set me on a good path, and just gave me some new skills as well. You kind of learn on the job in those types of roles. So it definitely led me to kind of where I am now, and has helped me setting up Hopscotch as well.
Yeah, I think it's really admirable when, someone decides to make that big jump right into a different industry and start reaching out to their network and see like where they can go. So I think, for anyone who is looking to, move careers, definitely, you could send maybe like 300 applications and you could get like one interview, right? So I think the power of networking, the power of tapping into your community it's very valuable. And I think, for those looking for a job right now, or maybe looking to switch, it's a very good like channel to, knock on doors and get them opened. So, just to, get your expertise, what are some ways that one can really power up his or her network at this moment, right? Given that the circumstances that in Singapore, we can only meet up in groups of 5, but everything has gone digital. What are some examples that what are some examples or advice you would give to someone looking to network or power up their network?
Yeah. So I would be, I completely understand that the on-ground thing is not working. Luckily, the internet is having even more of a moment than it ever has done before. And we all have access to the same resources. That's the good thing about this situation. There is so much free stuff out there. There is so much stuff that's coming online, and there are so many groups that are all, already established within certain social media platforms that you can tap into. So a very sort of, high level, I would say, start looking into what and where those communities are. So be quite specific in terms of what you're trying to achieve. If you're a mum who's looking to return to work, Hopscotch is quite a good example of that, but there are also plenty of others, smaller groups that are very specific to Singapore, where you might be able to get some help. There's also, you don't have, the good thing about the internet is you don't have to limit yourself to Singapore. You can start to tap into these different networks in other regions, and just ask questions, see who's out there, see who can help you, see who's done it before. So I think at a sort of more overview level, that's always a good way of doing things. The second tip I would give would be around mentorship. So do you know somebody who could either be your mentor or your sponsor within an industry or a role that you're looking to move into? And that's really, you know, this kind of work is a bit shameless, to be honest. You have to be a bit vulnerable. You know, you have to kind of tell your story and explain, put yourself across, you know, really kind of explain why you want to make the move, what your situation is, without sounding like, you know, a complete victim in the whole thing. But definitely you have to give some gravitas behind what it is that you're trying to achieve and why. And I think that's when people really sit up and listen. And, you know, the great thing about communities like Singapore is that people don't generally say no. Like if you kind of thrust them slightly and say, I see you're an expert in this field, do you have 15 minutes for a quick coffee chat online, or, you know, something along those lines, there's very few people that will kind of say no. So I think in that respect, I think we just have one question actually, which might be relevant. Identify a mentor. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Jennifer has asked, there's a couple of questions here. Jennifer has asked how to identify a mentor and how often you should be engaging with them. And Kerry has asked networking, and is this more key in Singapore? If so, how best to do this? Hopefully I've answered I'm answering the first question. The second question in terms of mentoring, yeah, so there are a couple of things where mentoring is concerned that are super important. The first one is really, obviously, there has to be relevant to your industry and what it is you're trying to do. I think that is quite key. I would say, you know, don't necessarily approach somebody who already works in your company. That might get a little bit awkward if that's a place that you might want to leave. And usually it's somebody more senior, and a mentorship arrangement generally is a kind of give and take. So they're definitely listening to you and trying to advise you, but you are also giving something to them in terms of their perspective and a fresh perspective and an outside perspective from where they currently are. Generally, these things are not super formal. So I know there are mentorship organizations out there that connect you with mentors within, you know, bigger businesses, but generally, if you can find someone that you get along with and that you have good chemistry with, then I would say there's no real need to connect with them any more than about once a month. And you need to have a sort of framework of what it is you're trying to achieve. And the great thing about a mentor is that they should hold you accountable to those steps. So to help you to understand how to move forward and exactly what you need to do. I mean, to give you an example, we ran a mentorship with MasterCard couple of years ago, and we had 7 women that went through that 6-month mentorship, and they met up every month. It was obviously face to face at that time, and that really helped them kind of progress forward and just gain confidence, you know, just have that sort of, particularly if you're out of work or you're a mum that's been away from the workplace for a little while, just stepping back into that world makes a huge difference, because suddenly you're thinking in a work way and you're accountable in a work way. So I would say, yeah, those are the things that I would recommend. And, you know, you just have to be a bit bold in the first place and just reach out and say, you know, I need some advice, I need some help. Are you willing to give me 15 minutes initially of your time, and then kind of go from there?
Yeah, I actually, so to kind of tag along on what you just said too, so I actually went to this speech. She was like an executive at Google, and she was saying that she gets hundreds of emails through LinkedIn asking, you know, her to be their mentor, right? Or they're always asking her like, oh, can you do this for me? Can you connect me with this person? Can, you know, you write me a recommendation, etc. And she was saying, you know, like there's so many, and obviously she wants to help them all, but it's also that person asking her for help should say, you know, how can I help you in your field of work, right? So there's one woman who asked her, oh, how can I help you build this program out, or can I be your personal assistant? And she ended up mentoring her, and that woman was on her team for 5 years, and they have a really good mentorship. So I totally agree.
I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think, you know, just be a bit mindful that if you are going to look at Google or Apple or Facebook or something, that yes, of course, I mean, even from a business perspective, they just get emails all the time about new business and personal contacts and all the rest of it. So maybe, you know, go a couple of levels down from that, and don't be surprised if they don't get back to you. But I think, adding some value to a relationship, it should be a two-way street, like 100%. And any good mentorship that I've been aware of is exactly that. You know, the mentor actually is getting as much from the mentee, whether it be perspective, whether it be specific skills, whether it be time, you know, perhaps you offer to, as you say, do something in return. So have a think about what that could look like for you, and just go for it, you know, just give it a go. I think it really does open doors, and definitely don't be afraid to be very, you know, once you've got an idea set, be very vocal about it. Like, tell everyone what you intend to do. Talk to your friends. Doesn't matter who it is. You never know. Somebody might know somebody who knows somebody who can get you in one way or another. It's exactly how it worked for me. And, you know, you have to sort of put the message out there, essentially, not to sound too kind of new age about the whole thing, but you have to put the message out there. Like, no one's a mind reader. They don't know what you want to do. So, you know,
Very true.
ask the question. The worst somebody can say is no, or just ignore you, and you haven't lost anything by them doing that. So just ask.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I think if you never ask, then you'll never know, right? So
Exactly. That's what I was brought up with.
yeah, so I guess, you know, for a follow-up question along that too, so in terms of, you know, people who are trying to transition in their career, or they're trying to change their career, or even start their career, what are some of, you know, what are the summer bigger roadblocks that you've seen, you know, people trying to navigate through their journey and in developing their career, and how should they be navigating it?
Yeah. So I think just not understanding how to go about it, and not having the confidence to start. I think you can get lost quite easily if you're not 100% clear on what your goal is. Goal setting is a huge part of this, particularly if you're looking to transfer, or if you're looking to restart, or re-enter the workforce. Get your goals really clear. It's, you know, what applied to you 5 years ago or 10 years ago does not necessarily need to apply to you now, and nor should it. I mean, you know, when I was 15, my needs were very different to when I was 5. When I was 25, my needs were very different to when I was 15. That's fine. It's okay to kind of move on and change. But just be really clear about what that looks like for you, and what success looks like for you as well. You know, does it still look like a huge corporate full-time job, or does it look like something a bit more part-time, or is it a complete kind of shift? So I think that's one definite roadblock where, you know, people just don't know where to start. The second thing is progress. So there's lots and lots of free stuff out there on the internet. You can read a blog about this, you can attend a webinar about this, you can kind of pick up some tips off Instagram about this, but sewing it all together in a way that makes sense for you, and in a way that you feel that you're moving forward, is really important. And, you know, it's certainly something that we're looking at Hopscotch, in kind of moving the platform forward, actually, because we see women kind of starting here and then going over there, and then not quite sure, and then giving up because they just feel really defeated about the whole thing. The other thing is, you know, I suppose, as I said at the beginning, ask the right questions of the company or the industry that you want to move into. So does it suit your needs? Is it flexible enough? Is there enough support out there? And can you see them walking the talk where that's concerned? And lastly, I just think support, you know, encouragement, inspiration. I mean, I say this quite a lot because I don't have my own Instagram account. So my Instagram account is my Hopscotch account, essentially. And I feel quite lucky because we follow people who are like global experts in training and in diversity and in women's issues and in mindfulness and health and well-being and all that sort of stuff. So my Instagram feed is super positive. It's just kind of like all these like amazing messages about how to do this, and, you know, these little video clips and all the rest of it. So surround yourself with that. Surround yourself with the right kind of mentality, the right kind of people. Get that support in play right at the very beginning, so that you feel like things are possible, and you see that example, and you don't feel you know, dissuaded, or, you know, one thing I really have a major issue with is this whole, and I think I said this to you, Emily, when we first spoke, is this whole kind of mum juggling thing.
Yes.
And I don't know how many mums there are on this call, but you know, do we look like we belong at a circus? Frankly, like, we are not juggling. Okay, this is about being strategic. It's about being smart about the way that you use your time. There is no need for you to be juggling stuff. It really is about a mindset and about getting into that mindset. So I kind of, you know, it just feels like a bit of a pity party, for want of a better phrase, when I just see this constant messaging around how crazy life is for mums. And, you know, I've got 3 kids, 5 and under, right? Like, I get it. It is crazy, but there are ways and means of organizing this. There are ways and means of making sure that it doesn't look like that for you, or at least not like 100% of the time. So, you know, I would say just get your mindset right and get that support in place. And look at who those people are who you could follow and who you could reach out to.
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to, you know, the point about like the whole like juggling thing, I think it's because, you know, some of us, we can barely take care of ourselves, right? So when we see moms being able to do everything, it's like, wow, like how does she do it? So yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's about being strategic and knowing how to manage these things. And going back to what you said, like at every age, right, your needs are different. And I think it's also like your responsibilities change drastically from each age levels. So like, you know, I know that you are an entrepreneur, you are a wife, a mother, you're an influencer in your space, you do so many things. So, you know, how do you personally merge all of your goals and all of these roles in your life? I think that would be really helpful for you to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, it takes some time and some practice. It's not like, you know, you have a baby and you've got it all figured out for sure. Or you get married and you've got it all figured out, or you start a crazy career and you understand exactly how to do this. I think what's been super helpful for me, so if any of you have read Dr. Stephen Covey's book, that is specifically around this. So it's about the 7 habits of effective people. I think I'm quoting him right here in the title. It's a super old book. It's been around for sort of 25, 30 years. And it is just a bit of a Bible in how to organize your life, essentially. And the first sort of 3 habits that he talks about are around proactivity, about strategy, and about delegation, you know, about how to kind of run that program in your life. And the thing that he says, and I feel this is really key, is that you have so many roles in your life. So no matter who you are, you will never be just, you know, there will never be just one strand to you. There will be lots of different strands. And all of these strands are equally important. You know, you let one slip and the other one is going to gain too much importance, and you will suffer because of that. Mm-hmm. So it's very important to get what those roles are clarified. So for me, it might be, yeah, you know, mum duties, wife duties, daughter or family duties, work duties, social responsibility, friends, all the rest of it. What are those roles that you have? What do you want to achieve in each one of those roles? Like, what's your kind of vision for that? Like, where do you want to go with it ideally? And then once you've got your vision in place and your goals in place, then it's like your tasks that follow on from that. And you can almost do it on a week by week basis. You know, you can have a kind of planner, which I've actually started doing recently. I mean, I love a list. I'm just a list person. So I've always kind of had this to a certain extent anyway. And I get to non-list people. This probably sounds like a total nightmare. But just from a broad perspective, you know, I'm pretty sure if you spent 20 minutes thinking about it, this would, you know, make sense to you in terms of who you are, the roles that you need to play, what you would like to achieve within each of those roles, and the time that you need to spend to get that done in the week. And, you know, when you look at it like that, it's kind of, okay, what can I delegate? So for me, when I was thinking about this, where the kids are concerned, I don't always need to be the one to drop them off at school and pick them up. So my kids start school at 9 o'clock. They finish school at 2:15. It's a 5-10 minute drive. So you're talking like at least sort of half, by the time you've got them in and out of the car, probably an hour out of your day, right? That doesn't always have to be my responsibility. Who else could help me with that to give me a little bit more time? You know, I guess there are tons of examples in this regard. I'm looking more and more for my business about automation, about not always being the person to answer the emails. You know, I'm so kind of stuck to my emails at the moment, which is just takes time. You know, it does. If you want to do it properly and you want to write nice emails to everybody and communicate well with everybody, it does take time. So how could you try to delegate that or to automate that in some way? So what are the things you can let go of within each of those roles, and what are the things that only you can really do amazingly well? Those are the things to keep. Those are the things to focus on. Everything else, you know, you can start to look at how somebody else could potentially be better at it. I mean, here in Singapore, we're super lucky because we have, you know, many of us have access to help within the house. So, you know, I love cooking, but I don't cook anymore. My helper is actually a better cook than I am. She loves cooking probably more than I do. She's brilliant at following a recipe, and I'm really bad at that. So, you know, for many of those things, it's kind of, okay, I would prefer to be the person cooking my kids' meals or cooking our meals, but it just ain't happening right now. Like, maybe I can pick it up in the future, but it's something that I can deal with letting go of. You know, so this doesn't have to be, you know, these tasks or whatever. It's not set in stone. You can change it. You can pick it back up in a year's time. You can change it in 3, 5, 10 years time. But if it doesn't align with your goals, if it doesn't align with where you want to get to, either get rid of it or give it to somebody else who can do it, you know, as well as you, or even better potentially.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about like prioritizing, and I definitely think that you should just get better at what you're good at until you're the best and focus on those. Yeah, so that also kind of leads into my next question about like, you know, what have you seen that you believe we should be upskilling, or that what we should be focusing on, whether it's, you know, being a better speaker, or like my friends have started to learn how to code because technology is so hot and everyone suddenly wants to become a software engineer. So I'm curious to know like what you've seen, like what are the current trends, and what do you think are, you know, soft skills or maybe hard skills that we should be developing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think starting with soft skills, there are so many out there. And the thing with soft skills is you don't know what you don't know, right? Everybody thinks that they're a good communicator. Everybody thinks that they're relatively good at, you know, writing emails, or maybe selling, or maybe designing something very basic. I don't know, whatever it might be. Everybody kind of thinks that they can do it to a certain extent. And, you know, nobody kind of, they might think that they don't have enough confidence. They might think that, I don't know, they have problems with communicating difficult messages. But very few people take the time to actually improve those soft skills. You know, even things like visualization, positivity mindset, success mindset, managing finances, all of those sorts of things that are super easy to get better at, and everybody should try to get better at them, because they will make you essentially a more well-rounded, employable person. You know, many employers out there at the moment look for those soft skills as much as the hard skills. If you don't fit in from a, you know, fit in inverted commas from a cultural perspective, then, you know, you're not the person that's going to get the role, because it's a very competitive world out there. And, you know, as I mentioned, this is something that we're looking very carefully at Hopscotch, because, you know, like I said, there are these bits and pieces that are out there, but ways in which genuinely help you make progress, that make you feel like you're making progress, that, you know, hold you accountable and push you to a different level. That I think is important from a soft skill perspective. You know, never stop learning where that's concerned, definitely. In terms of harder skills, yeah, I mean, tech is definitely a huge one. We have a course called Digital Warriors, which is all about data and analytics. So even if you have a kind of, you know, not necessarily a STEM background or a mathematical or scientific background, if you have a marketing background even, or if you're quite good with numbers, it's a great field to get into because there are so many roles, number one, and increasingly so. You know, there are stats out there to show that this industry will be hiring, you know, in the millions by the time we get to 2024, which is not a very long time away. And it's also a great job for you to be able to do from home, you know, something that you don't necessarily have to be in an office to do. So whether it's kind of social media analytics, Google Analytics, more stuff around sort of performance marketing or data, those are the sort of non-scary tech kind of things that I would look at. If you're a bit more of a technically minded person, then definitely kind of coding and web build and JavaScript and you know, full stack developing, all of that sort of stuff is hugely in demand. And particularly, you know, we get briefs all the time for women specifically. You know, they want to increase the number of women in that department. So yeah, again, it's something that we're working on, and you know, we have several bits in the process where that's concerned. So I hope that we can help a bit more where that's concerned in the future. But yeah, those are the two areas I would say are quite hot at the moment.
Yeah, gotcha. Thanks for sharing. I definitely do agree with you too on like the data analytics. That is very hot, right? Because every company has to have some sort of data coming from their software or their product. So yes, that's a really good space to go into. So, you know, to kind of round out our conversation for our last question, you know, I think very highly of you, Helen, and I think you have so much wisdom and great advice to offer. So I think what would be great is, you know, maybe just your own personal advice on what you would give to women who are really struggling to find their footing at this time, or just like in their career, or maybe they feel a little bit lost. So yeah, what personal advice would you give them?
So yeah, I would say, I guess a summary of everything that I'm passionate about and that I've spoken a bit about is, you know, don't doubt yourself too much. I think I spoke on a panel recently, and they quite often ask this question around what advice would you give your younger self? And I think my advice to my younger self would be to always go with your gut feeling. You know, to always kind of don't sort of double question yourself too much, and just go for it. You know, just take that first step, because even if it's not in quite the right direction, it's better than being unhappy where you are right now. So, you know, we have lots of things in the works at Hopscotch that will be revealed in the next few months. So I would say, like, definitely register with us. I hope that we can be helpful, at least from an inspiration perspective at the moment. You know, there are not a huge amount of jobs out there, so that's, you know, that's not our focus right now, but we just want to get people in the best place possible so that when that opportunity does come up, they are front of the queue. So surround yourself with positive thoughts, read, you know, download some books around this whole topic. Just don't stand still. Don't kind of stay static on it. Don't overthink it. Just, you know, go for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that. The don't stand still, right? Because if you aren't learning, you aren't moving forward. So completely agree with that. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I mean, I guess that wraps up our fireside chat, and I would love to have you answer the questions that were given on our chat function, right? So let's see. So there is a good question from Anisha. So she said, how would you differentiate a mentorship from a career coach? Is it just the financial element? Yeah.
Yeah. No, she said, I think you answered my question. So I can't remember what I said that answered that question, but I'm very glad that I did. But no, I mean, I would say if that's not clear, so a mentorship is, you know, mentors are not trained in career coaching. They're not going to be able to necessarily give you exactly the right advice. They don't. They will see things very much from one perspective, you know, from their career perspective. So this is why you have to be really selective about the mentor that you choose. Whereas career coaches are much more industry agnostic, and they will just help you get in the right place, you know, mentally. So, you know, we work with some amazing career coaches. Mary Barrett is one of them that I would highly recommend, who's here in Singapore. Archana Bhatia as well, who's our training lead at Hopscotch, who's located in Dubai. You know, we work with PCA Global, who are experts in their field, but, you know, much more about women who are already in the workforce, coaching them rather than individually. So there are lots and lots of coaches out there. Heidi Jones is another one, who's a great kind of integrative career and lifestyle coach. So that's what I would say is the key difference there. And I think they both have a role to play for sure.
All right, next question by Farah. So she's been in her industry for 17 years and she's now looking to switch into another industry. How should she start networking, and is it unrealistic to expect a senior position?
Yeah, I'd love to know obviously a little bit more information about that. What industry is she in now and where does she want to move to? Yeah, how would I start networking? Hopefully I've answered that question in terms of just getting your message out there and tapping up anyone and everyone. Look through your LinkedIn, look for a mentor, look for relevant groups and communities in the location that you want to get a job, in the industry you want to get a job in, and put that message out there and be very clear about that. Get your CV in order. But I would say, like, it's so much more about you know, you have to get your mindset right before you get your CV right. We get so many requests from people to help them rewrite their CV. That's not what it's about. Like, that's not going to get you across the line. It's so much more about being specific, being targeted, knowing the right people, and yes, having the CV to back it up. But you know, without all the rest of it, you're not going to be the person that gets that job. And in terms of being unrealistic to expect a senior position, yeah, it kind of depends. I mean, the honest answer is probably. It does depend on what those industries are, and how transferable those skills are. So to give you an example, when I moved out of broadcast, I was, you know, I've been in that industry for 8 years or whatever, and I moved into PR. And to be perfectly honest, they gave me a manager title, and I was managing someone who was so much better at it than I was, because, you know, she'd been trained, right? She'd been trained from kind of day dot on what all these different systems and everything else were, and I just had no idea when I walked in there. But what does carry you through is a level of maturity, a level of perspective, a level of kind of being able to adapt your skills easily to a different role. So, you know, yes, you may need to take a bit of a sidestep or a bit of a backward step, because be honest with yourself, do you know everything about that industry? Could you genuinely walk into the same level role and feel confident about what you were doing? If the answer is 80% yes, then go for it. If the answer is only 20% yes, then maybe you do need to spend a little bit more time kind of putting the groundwork in. So it completely depends on what those industries are and the whole sort of personal angle around that.
All right. Another question from Diksha. She had mentioned, how do you effectively approach HRs on LinkedIn for a job opportunity? I think we kind of touched upon that as well, but if you want to just quickly give an answer to that.
Yeah, they get completely inundated. I mean, LinkedIn is a really tough one. Like, to give you an example, we're part of a bigger recruitment agency, and we once had 80,000 applications in one
Wow.
month. to the job.
A lot.
So you can imagine how difficult that is to genuinely manage. So I would say it's much more about, I mean, you can try that. There isn't really a standard way of doing it. I think it's more, you know, perhaps we can have a coffee or a conversation. These are the skill sets that I brought. Be very specific. I noticed you're hiring for X. I can bring this to the table in this experience. Can we have a chat? You know, even at Hopscotch, you know, it's unfortunately the case that we get people asking for one-on-one conversations. We just do not have the manpower or the woman power to get that done. So we just can't. But if you're kind of bringing, as we sort of said earlier, if you're bringing something to the table that they genuinely need, that's when you're probably going to be able to open the doors. And outside of that, it's really about building a personal connection with people who might be in the right industry for you.
Yeah. I also want to bring up the point too. So like maybe, you know, you don't have to approach a person who works in HR. You approach someone that you met from a community who works at that company. You develop a relationship with them, and then they give you a referral. So I think that's also very effective as well. Yeah. Another question from Jennifer. So she said, Helen, do you have any specific organizations or platforms that are best for upskilling?
It depends what you want to upskill into. So I would say there are definitely some good free tools out there right now. So if you check out Google's Digital Garage, I think it's called, they have about 135 different courses that I'm actually doing one of them now. And they are pretty amazing. Like they go from sort of very basic to very advanced. So I would say check that out. If you want any more information on the Digital Warriors stuff, just search for Digital Warriors on Teachable. That's up there, and that is a Google approved course that we put together as a team of women, specifically for women. I would say you can, you know, look at online courses on Udemy or on other courses on Teachable. It really just depends on kind of what you want to upskill in. I think one of the things with sort of digital learning, and one of the things that we're trying to get around on Hopscotch, is that it can be very sporadic. It requires you to have quite a lot of motivation, you know, to set yourself that goal and to achieve it when nobody's pushing you, and you know, you don't have a boss breathing down your neck, or you don't have someone to be accountable to, can be quite difficult. So you could also look at communities. There's one called Female Entrepreneurs Association that I follow, that's specifically for women wanting to set up their own business. And that's much more of a, you know, you pay a sort of low membership fee every month, and you get a lot of resources in there. You get partners and groups and a community that you're kind of accountable to, and you can be a part of and network within. So I would say it just kind of depends on what you want to achieve, but just bear in mind that the digital stuff, you have to have quite a lot of motivation to you know, even for me, it's starting to kind of slip slightly, and I'm a relatively motivated person. So you might want to look for sort of community support around that as well.
Awesome. Okay. So we'll take two more questions, and then we'll wrap up this. So Cindy had asked if we are at risk of getting retrenched or let go in the next few months, what should we do?
Yeah, I guess you just have to take the positives out of that. This is a real opportunity at this point in time for everybody, you know, myself included, to have some time to reflect about what the future looks like and what you want that to look like. You know, in terms of professional or career advice, I would say start planning now. If it looks like that's going to happen, start planning now. You know, I don't know how connected you are to Singapore, or whether you're Singaporean, Cindy, but look at, is this going to be the right place for you to find the next job? Are you willing to move? Can you move? What other kind of, I know plenty of people who have been made redundant just before COVID hit for whatever reason, or during COVID. And actually, there are jobs out there. It's not like they don't exist. People are still hiring. So you might want to kind of really hone down where it is you want to go, what you want to do. Do you need to get a job immediately? Could you travel somewhere else to work? All of those huge questions, ask yourself now and get really clear on what that is, because what you don't want is to have a scattergun approach and be panicking about it, because that's kind of what everybody else does, and that doesn't really get you anywhere. So be very kind of clear on what your next step should be. And if you need to upskill, start doing it now. Like, start researching into what that could look like. As I said, there are so many resources out there that could be really helpful.
Okay, awesome. Okay, last question. And for those who, might have questions even after this, we will send an email out and you can contact Helen. And yes, I'll start that communication. So last question, and it's from Natasha. So how did you identify what industry you wanted to move to? And I kind of want to, reframe that question as well. Like, how do you identify if it's the right move to make into that industry as well, right? Like, maybe you're interested in it, but you have one foot in and you're like, oh, I don't know. There's a lot of risk, right? So how do you evaluate that risk in moving into a new industry?
Yeah. So how do you identify it? Again, comes down to passion, essentially. I mean, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years' time? What does that look like from a work-life balance? I just need to mute everybody. Just going to mute everyone and come back. Hang on. Okay. Yeah. What does that look like for you? Sorry, I completely lost the thread of my thread of thought now.
No worries. So the question was, how did you identify what industry you wanted to move to, and how do you calculate the risk of moving into an industry you may or may not, want to go into?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, in terms of, like I said, I can answer this from a very specific personal perspective. Sit down and look at what your transferable skills might be. Are you an amazing salesperson? Are you brilliant with data or with numbers? Are you an amazing communicator? Do you write really well? Can you create beautiful design or templates, or at least have an interest in that, that you could perhaps learn better how to do it? And then what are the industries that could use those types of people? What sort of job roles are there that match that type of skill set? So I would start with you and then go from there. In terms of the risk, yeah, I mean, there's risk in everything, isn't there? There's risk in staying where you are if you're unhappy, because essentially you're going to lose interest, and you may even lose that job. I mean, that has happened to me twice in my lifetime. I've been made redundant because I essentially lost interest in what I was doing, and that was the right decision, and it pushed me into a new direction. So what's the risk of staying? What's the risk of leaving? And if it's financially focused, then you can bet your bottom dollar that you will try that bit harder if you know you need to meet your rent every month, or you need to meet your school fees or your mortgage payment or whatever it might be. I mean, certainly when I moved from broadcasting to PR, which was an optional move, I was terrified. I spent the first year just thinking I was going to be sacked every day. It was terrifying. And actually, when I chose to leave that job and we moved to Dubai shortly after that, I was absolutely shocked by their response, which was take me out for dinner on several occasions, sit me down, try to persuade me not to leave, because I thought I wasn't doing an amazing job. I have to be honest. I was like, I was honestly sort of on the edge of my seat every day trying to get this right. So it's not always a bad a bad thing to be outside of your comfort zone, because it really pushes you to sometimes do your best and do your best work, and to really find something that works for you. And you know, if you don't make the right move, then move again. It's a bit like, you know, for me being an expat, we've now moved 2 or 3 times, and every time it just gets that bit less scary. So, you know, don't be afraid to be a bit afraid. It's not, it is not a bad thing to have that fear kind of snapping at your heels every now and again.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Helen, for taking the time to answer all these questions and to have this fireside chat discussion. Are there any, you know, last words that you want to give to the audience before we wrap this up?
No, I feel like I've just spoken enough, to be honest. I feel like everybody else.
So good.
No, yeah, actually an hour of me talking is enough, Emily.
Well, Helen, I just want to thank you so much for joining us at Singapore Women's Network. For those interested, definitely please check out Hopscotch. We're going to send an email, and Helen, I remember you said that you have like a resource that you also want to send to everyone.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll just send a kind of summary of some of the links that I've mentioned in this, and some of the organizations that I've mentioned, to point people in the right direction.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for, again, everything and for being on this. Yeah, so I'll send out that email, and thank you everyone for being on this virtual event, and hope to see you at the next event.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all the questions and the input. And thank you, Emily, for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.